Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another show of Big Hero News. Kia ora Chewy.
How you doing, Pat?
Good, man. You grooving as well?
Yeah, not doing too bad.
Yeah, doing good. Good to see everybody in the chat there, you guys. How long have they been going for this evening? It's always lovely to come in and see you guys just hanging out, and started at 8 o'clock. Okay, so they've been going for an hour.
You absolute psychopaths. Love
Beautiful people. Lovely to be with you tonight. Looking forward to a show. Got a lot to talk about tonight. Obviously, some of the subject matter over the next few days is going to be the incoming government, the outgoing government, the what's happening, what's coming in here, what's coming in there. I was fascinated last night with our chat with Bomber, and you correct me here, Chewy, if I'm a little bit too blunt. Like if I'm saying it like it wasn't quite. He could see a path to a second election. Is that a fair way of saying it? Because he seemed to think there was a path that was probably more likely than what I thought was a path, right? Because, but we're gonna play some audio tonight, and video tonight with Moana Maniapoto, talking to David Seymour, and one of the things he says, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, is because Moana, it's very clear that David Seymour wants to have this referendum on the treaty. It's very clear that Luxon doesn't. And Moana says something like, what happens when he rules it out? And David Seymour goes, well, we just rule it back in again. And I just went, I wonder if there are going to be some things that get in the way. Listening to the Winston today, Winston basically saying some of their numbers are shithouse and aren't going to work. Luxon's already talking about being, we've already started, haven't we? Already talking about being a manager. You know, the news tonight, one of the stories I'm going to show you, it basically talks about him not wanting a portfolio, right? To basically being the glue that holds the like a manager, like managing government. You know, so in other words, your managers under you have the departments, i.e. the portfolios, and you don't have one. And I'm just, it's going to be an interesting time.
That's a really interesting point of way to put yourself forward. Like traditionally, prime ministers have had like quite important, high-profile portfolios, like minister
or like a passion, or like a passion thing, like Jacinda was tourism,
Minister of the Arts.
Tourism
and the arts.
Yeah, Helen Clark was arts, wasn't she? Yeah. But well, look, I mean, I guess what I'll say is what I'm hearing is these few weeks are going to be them kind of publicly mulling things over. So we'll check it out. Hey, look, also just let you know as well, thanks so much for the people who jumped on board the old store since the last show. This is one way that you guys can support what we do, help us pay a few bills. Genuinely thankful to it. We are running a special this month. Well, it's not a special yet. I'll do some specials, but we're running a bottom feeder special this month. Of course, thanks to Mr. Luxon's comments about bottom feeders. That's our bottom feeder t-shirt. If you are indeed a bottom feeder, or you want to support us bottom feeders, then you can get online to bhnshop.nz. Of course, the regular BHN merch is there as well. The bottom feeder hoodies and t-shirts come in 3 colours. They come in a rust colour, they come in a tan colour, they come in a black colour. Now that tan looks a bit yellowy, so I've actually got photos there as well showing what tan looks like. And these are images from Cloak themselves, so the brand we use. So that's the tan and that's the rust, just so you guys can also see exactly what they look like. Yeah, so if you're a bottom feeder and you want to be a bottom feeder with us, then you can head to bhnshop.nz. And it's a great way if you want to help support what we do. Of course, there's also the Patreon. If you want to be a patron, patreon.com/Big Hero News. That's obviously just the bottom one. I'm a bottom feeder. I need one. Well, bhnshop.nz, Dave. Go fill your boots, my friend.
Hey, just a thought before we crack on, Pat. if he doesn't want a portfolio,
Yep.
is he saying that managing his caucus and his coalition partners is going to eat up all his time?
I don't know.
It's
Don't know
just
what
going
he's
to be
saying.
such a shit show that's going to be his full-time job, is wrangling his idiot farm.
There's a scrum today, and I haven't got the footage for this scrum. I probably should have had it. But we were talking to the media, and the media's going like, because Luxon's talking about doing things a new way, funding for things in a new way, and the media's trying to get him to admit that the way Bill English did it was shithouse. It's kind of a stupid scrum, actually. But you could see him getting visibly annoyed, basically at the end of it going, I don't care. I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to do things my way. And it just made me think, attaching those kind of comments from the scrum to the, look, I'm not saying he's not having a portfolio, but that was sort of the reports today. I mean, that may change, right? It may change, but that was sort of the reports today. And I'm interested because it does feel very, it's like, a manager of a football team. The manager of the football team, soccer team in the Premier League in the UK doesn't do a lot of hand-on-hand coaching. They have coaches under them, and they're the manager over the top. It sort of feels a bit like that, which does it evokes that idea of a CEO in charge of lots of departments rather than a prime minister in charge of lots of portfolios. But I guess, I mean, if we're going to be fair, well, he's won. Let him do it his way. See how it works. But it seems interesting to say nonetheless. Couple of things. The first thing I want to show you is we have a kindred spirit, and I emailed David today, David Packman, that is. David's been on my podcast, another podcast once, and I've been on his as well a couple of times. Very interesting thing happened to David Packman today. This might seem familiar to you, Chewy. Have a listen to the first 60 seconds of this.
Well, it pains me to say this. This is no April Fool's joke. This is not a game. This is very real. Our YouTube channel, as we approach 2 million subscribers, is now just one strike away from being completely shut down, period, and us getting kicked off of YouTube. What? Let me explain what's going on. We cover debates of all kinds. I believe that covering debates is a public service.
Covering debates.
When we cover debates hosted by other channels, we are covering them under fair use, meaning that we are adding commentary, they are educational in nature, we are transforming the content by adding our views and those of the audience. But Fox News doesn't feel that way. And Fox News now has us one copyright strike away from the end of the YouTube channel. Last week, I told you that Fox News hit us with one copyright strike over the coverage of one of their Republican primary debates.
Long story short, you got the gist of it. One of our sort of case law. It's not case law. It was in America. Everyone, live streams the debates and comments on it, which was one of our sort of rationales for doing it here. Except this year, Packman and others have done it, and Fox News are putting copyright strikes against them. So it does feel a little ironic that it happened to us 2 weeks ago, and we still have those 2 strikes, although we are able to live stream obviously again. And just after it happened with me talking to TVNZ and saying, look, this is the American model and this is what they do and yada, yada, yada. David Packman's had 2 copyright strikes against him from Fox News. And just so you know, there's like a 3-month stand down period or a 3-month probationary period. You have to go and do copyright school, which is just watching a video and answering some true false questions, and then you pass copyright school, and then you're able to get the strikes taken off after 3 months. So January the 5th or something, we have the strikes taken off. But I just wanted to share with you that it's not just us, others out there in the international world of independent media. You watch that clip from David Packman, go look up David Packman, you'll find it on his videos. He makes more of a case about sort of mainstream media trying to crush independent media. Now, I don't think that's necessarily the case. In fact, from speaking to TVNZ, that's not the case for us. They're just trying to protect their investment more than anything. But America is a different model, and independent media in America is showing up mainstream media, getting more views. Podcasts and some programs are getting more views than the heritage networks are, and so it looks like they started to push back. So I just thought that was interesting, Chewy, to share with you something that we've just gone through here. David's going through as we speak in America as well, and it's the first time it's happened to him. over there, and it was the first time. Well, it was the first time we've done it, and it's the first time it's happened to us. So just an interesting little observation.
Yeah, well, we did it first, so.
Actually, he did it first. He's been doing it for years, but we did it first in New Zealand.
No, I mean, we got copyright rights first, so we're blazing a trail and getting the big boys to jump on us, step on us, daddy, that sort of thing.
One other thing, I put a tweet up tonight. You might have heard of this place called Twitter, Chewy. It's an interesting place. I know you're not a part of it anymore, but it's interesting. No. I put up a poll today. This is fun. That means every time I
how's it going in Twitter?
I've one of my posts today said block blockity block. That was all that my post said, all that my tweet said. Look, I don't care about people disagreeing or having conversations with me that they think are wrong. I think as is evident when we've had people in our chat here. But when someone just comes on and just their first line is just an abusive line, I've just decided I'm just gonna, and me, Joey, I haven't blocked many people at all up until the last few weeks, and I'm just gonna be like, well, either it's a cesspit is Twitter, or if there's absolute pieces of shit out there whose primary desire is just to, what did Bomber say last night? Grudge fuck an argument?
Grudge fuck, yeah.
Then I'm gonna be more overt with the block key. Now I don't want to block people, but if you just come in and go, oh, you're fucking this, and I'm just like, well, there's no actual conversation or anything. It's like, there's no point. But I did something on Twitter today, which was just a poll. And I'll get your view of this now, Chewy. We can use this because you won't have seen it. So if it was up to you, and you had to appoint one of them, so you have to appoint one of them, who would be your Deputy Prime Minister? Winston Peters, David Seymour, Nicola Willis. And we've had coming up to 300 votes, and Winston's at 60%. And David's at the bottom. So Winston, Nicola, David. I think if it was me, I'd pick Nicola Willis as the PM. I think that in a government, you can see Jason here has given us his response like that. That's Jason's response to the question.
That's great.
It's a good one actually. I reckon that the deputy of the party that is the biggest in government probably should be, and I think the only time the others get a deputy prime ministership as a part of the negotiation is to support the government. But of those three choices, and play the game, you have to pick one to be deputy PM. Who are you picking?
Peters has done the job before.
Yep.
So, oh God, I hate it. I hate it, Pat. I would probably say Peters.
You would?
I think in the times where a deputy prime minister would really count, like in times of emergency or if the prime minister is out of action, I hate to say it, the old man's probably a safe pair of leathery, withered hands.
So you'd go with his actual experience. You'd actually rate his experience in that above Nicola Willis and David
I mean,
Seymour.
He's been foreign minister before, Yeah.
It's really interesting.
I wouldn't put it past Seymour to sell everything.
I heard commentary the other day by someone saying he didn't think Seymour would be into it because it is primarily a sort of a, it's like the deputy president, the vice president. It's kind of almost a ceremonial position, and that doesn't feel like David Seymour's vibe. But maybe it'll be really interesting to see. Obviously, after I think it's the 3rd of November, so 3 weeks away from now, give or take, getting those final numbers through. 20% of the vote coming in specials. I heard commentators the other day saying, and I didn't know this, I've always thought the Greens pick up a couple, but a couple of commentators were like, the Māori Party always do really well, was their version, like really well on special votes, and the Greens do well and Labour do okay. And that was all they said. So, if they pick up 1 or 2 more seats between them all, then it's definitely Winston Peters is needed by them to get over. Probably also means technically, I don't know, I'd have to look at the numbers, but if Winston Peters is needed to get them over the line, theoretically only, it means he could also put the other side in, I would assume. Because if you need Winston to get over the line, that means I would assume that the other block from the left would have enough to use Winston to get over the line. That's not going to happen, but All right, so Winston, for you, that's the vibe, is it?
I hate it. I hate saying it. I hate it sitting there in my brain. But yeah.
I think there's a really interesting conversation around Speaker of the House for Winston Peters, because Speaker of the House is a direct line to a knighthood. You know, so depending what he wants, Deputy Prime Ministers don't get knighthoods, speakers do. So, although Speaker of the House also means you've got to be at work every day, sort of thing. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. J Transform NZ, thank you for the super chat. We appreciate it greatly for the $5. National security and intelligence is its own portfolio. Won't Luxon have this portfolio? Well, we'll play the story shortly, and you guys can have a listen. I don't want to give you incorrect facts, but there is a comment by one of the reporters that said he's going to be the Minister of Glue. And I don't think they mean huffing. It's like, because he says, I'm going to be the glue that holds everything together. So they kind of make the assertion he won't be taking a traditional portfolio. But as I said, I think these next 3 weeks are going to be a little bit of, maybe this and maybe this and maybe this and maybe this. And then we'll have a real clear idea probably in the first week of November. Make sense? Makes sense.
Yep.
All right. Thank you for the $5 super chat. We appreciate that. And let's get to some stories, shall we? Why don't we start off with the Labour Party going into their first caucus. I have to say at the moment, there are some pretty average takes being made by Labour MPs at the moment. Have you seen that one about one of the kind of backbenchers going, no more champagne at the Coro Lounge? Lounge is the hardest thing to go through. Only lemonade from now on. Yeah, just...
What the fuck?
Yeah, it's just saying silly things. And is it O'Connor? I don't know. One of the MPs came out and told the media to fuck off today as he was going to the toilet, and this doesn't feel very gracious. You know, we always hear that idea of the power being passed peacefully. That's something that more comes out of the American system, but whatever some of these individuals within Labour are doing at the moment, it doesn't feel like a particularly professional transition at the moment. I mean, if I was the leader there, I'd be like, you guys pull your fucking heads in, keep your mouths shut, talk to the media if you want, but if you're not saying anything good, then don't say anything at all. Certainly don't tell them to fuck off, which happened today. Right, so the first caucus post the election. Let's have a look what happened with the Labour Party.
Flanked by his friends, facing up to the harsh reality of an electoral punishing.
We're picking ourselves up again. It's been a pretty brutal weekend.
A brutal verdict from the public. He lost out on the top job, and immediately questions began swirling around whether Labour would let him keep his leadership.
Are you still hungry to be in politics?
I'm not done with politics yet.
Hipkins.
Interesting question though, because mind you, others have lost. I'm pretty sure Helen Clark lost in 96 and then won in 99. But I think she was an up-and-comer. Hipkins feels like he's sort of at the top already, and the only way is down. So I think there will be some new leader within, what should we say? We'll say 3 months, 3 to 6 months, maybe.
I don't think so. Personally, I think they're going to keep him on.
I was just going to mention your track record with making predictions about leaders of parties, but you know, that's okay. We can leave that for today.
Wow, you're gonna go there, are you? Okay.
Well, look, I don't know
Matthew.
either. Because it's maybe a poison chalice, you know, so some people may not want it. Let's have a look what else is said.
Hesitant to commit to his role without chatting with his team first.
The team have been incredible, actually, in sort of supporting each other, supporting those MPs who are not returning. I think we'll regroup as a team.
And the team is hurting. They were smashed from north to south. Labour fortresses like Mount Roskill flipped. Mount Albert, the seat of Jacinda Ardern, David Shearer and Helen Clark, down to the wire. A 20,000 majority whittled to just over 100 votes.
Really interesting, yeah? So here's a question. I'm going to play one of these interactions with the media for the MP for Mount Albert. Excuse me, her name just slips my brain right about now. I think it's fine, but there's a little bit of testiness there because the media are asking her about her failing to hold to the numbers, and she's celebrating her win. But you have a look and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Are you embarrassed about the result on Saturday? My result or the party's? No, I'm really, really proud of my result. How did you do so badly in Mount Albert, though? What a ridiculous question. I didn't do badly. I did really, really well.
MPs new and old.
So she won on a weekend where National obliterated lots of other Labor seats. So is going from a 20,000 majority to a barely majority, is that doing really badly? Or looking at the context of what's happened to the Labor Party, is that a great success because she held a seat when others didn't? I tend to lean towards it was a pretty good result for her. The media is like, how did you do so badly? What, to win? Yeah, but how did you do so badly in winning? I don't know. It feels a bit bitchy from the media to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't fault her reaction at all. Like, she won her seat. She held the line when so many people didn't. Yeah. No, it's a dumb question. She called them on it.
Yep. All right. Fair enough. Let's keep it going to our best mate, the ute driver.
Old filed into the room, closed the door, and for nearly 5 hours thrashed out their thrashing, some failing to keep tempers in check as they emerged.
Is Chris Hipkins still the leader of the Labor Party?
Eventually, Hipkins appeared with an answer himself.
Are you still the leader of the Labor Party?
Yes.
Well, for now at least.
The leader is the leader until they're not, and I'm certainly still the leader of the Labor Party.
The caucus already straying from script, talking about other contenders, Willie Jackson admitting some have leadership aspirations.
Are you expecting that there will be a contest, that you'll have to fight to keep it?
I hope not, but I'm not sure.
No diligence done in presenting a face of unity.
We have a leader currently. We haven't got a new caucus yet. We're not discussing leadership at the moment.
Currently, at the moment.
That's interesting. We're not talking leadership at the moment. So that means that question was never even asked today. Do you know what I'm saying? If that's the case, we're not talking leadership at the moment, which kind of makes sense because you've got to get your caucus together, you've got to get the new people through the door, and then you have that conversation. Yep. So actually, the media beat up around, has he been rolled? Has he been rolled? You probably can't roll him yet. You know, there'll be new MPs who are going to take a few weeks to get their feet under their desks, and then that conversation is more natural to happen. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting way to do it. Felix is saying, can the media back off? I mean, I think when the media sees blood, they go for it. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That's the process of the media. That's what they do. Yeah. And, you know, when someone's hurting, they typically twist the knife rather than remove it and place a soothing bit on it. So I think, I don't want to say it's okay, but I'd say it's to be expected, Chewy, that they'll be looking for blood. Because remember as well, and I'm not saying this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but, you know, the media is a business and they need to get people watching their product and they need to have people clicking on those headlines so they can get their ad revenue, so they can get their money they need to make their product, which is why that old saying goes around, and I'm sure most of you have heard it, which is, if it bleeds, it leads. And if you talk to reporters, and I've seen this in documentaries, about a guy saying, you know, a heroic act on the beach of someone being saved or a shooting down the road, which would you go to? And they go, oh, the shooting. Always the shooting. Yeah. Because if it bleeds, it leads.
As far as O'Connor's glorious fuck off, can I say they are camped right outside the caucus room?
Yep.
And from my understanding, he was just popping out to go to the toilet. He hadn't even got the caucus room door closed.
Yeah.
Before they pounced on him. Look, the man's from the West Coast. That's a West Coast response. I don't fault him for that at all.
Well, you know? I do, but I don't fault him for his reaction. I kind of think I wish more politicians were like that. I just think on today of all days, like if he had done that like in the middle of the election run because the media were being wankers, fair enough. But today is not the day to do that. That's all I'm saying. Maybe I'm doing a PR spin or a marketing spin, but yeah, that's all I would say, Chewy. All right, let's keep going with this wonderfully light-hearted story about the demolition of that man's soul and his heir successor.
Hardly a vote of confidence.
Are you confident that you have the full confidence of your caucus?
Look, I'm the leader of the Labor Party, and as I indicated, that's not even something that we're going to, to contemplate properly until we've got a final result.
Kieran McAnulty is often floated as an heir.
Would you completely rule out a run for leadership if the position became open?
Absolutely. I'm not at all interested.
But the position...
Do you believe him? Because he sounds very convincing. I mean, I think he'd be a good leader, but if you look at what happens to leaders, I can understand why people might want to run a mile from it as well.
Yeah, no, I believe him in that moment.
Right.
Do I believe that'll always be his position? No.
All right.
Remained filled today.
And I don't expect the caucus to rush any decisions on the future either. I think we do need to take some time to make sure we reflect properly on the election result.
Labor tore itself apart during its last turn on the opposition benches. Andrew Little pieced them back together and dished some advice to the new lot. Keep your cool. Keep your humility.
Yeah, that's it.
Politics is a team sport.
That's it. It's keeping your cool. I mean, the fuck off is not keeping your cool, even if it was an appropriate fuck off. That's all I guess I'm saying, Joey.
And so the team must be strong. And there are difficult times and challenging times. This is one of them. And so there needs to be a good conversation about it. But it's not on the basis of kind of ripping each other apart.
The reflecting will take some time, even if losing was an inevitability.
Did you know at that point that you were going to lose the election?
Look, you always live in hope right up until the last moment.
Now living in hope, Labor can keep it together.
Yes.
Well, Jenna's with us now. Kia ora, Jenna. Hard day for Labor. What's the mood of the caucus?
I don't think we need Jenna's commentary as well. We've basically had the sum total of that. So, yeah.
What was the mood of the caucus, Jenna? Well, one of them told me to fuck off. So there's that.
I'm interested, eh? I mean, I had an opportunity to come across my desk, let's just say in the last few months, to look at a job, a job in media. And the job in media was to bring together two parts of media and introduce a third. And I didn't get the job, but there was something quite exciting about, even though it was a media group that already had a couple of established brands, it would still be something new because it would be a way of integrating those brands and bringing a third stripe in there as well. So this idea about Labor today, I don't know, there's something there. I don't know, would there be something quite exciting about kind of having this brand, having this group, having this core together and starting afresh? Or would it be just all doom and gloom? Because really, if you're not in government, what are you doing? What do you think?
Yeah, look, I don't know. I think this is an acid test for any politician, right? Is how they take a loss or how they take a potential loss. Like my personal view is Key bailed as soon as he saw that the numbers weren't going to carry him to the next election. Yeah. And he was just going, I'm out on a high. I'm out as a winner. I'm out on my own terms. I don't have to deal with all the bullshit that I've seen, because he would have seen, Helen Clark quit on the night of the loss.
Yeah.
And that's a big moment. So yeah, I think Key saw his numbers, did a little bit of tea leaf reading, and decided that he was going to go on his own terms. I think.
Can I ask you something about that?
Yeah.
Did Jacinda do the same thing?
I think it definitely would have been a part of her decision, in my opinion. And I think, think about that. She had that break, she had the recess, she came back and she said, "Nah, I can't do it." Now, I think that's a combination of, do I want to continue to put up with the flack and how much it's going to ramp up as we go into an election to a potential loss?
Yeah.
Is that worth it? Is that worth the mental bandwidth? Or is the best thing that I can do for myself and the party stand aside and maybe break that association with the COVID response, rightly or wrongly?
Yeah.
And at that time, Chippy had a reputation as a firefighter, he was the one you parachuted into difficult, hard to manage portfolios with problems. So I mean
he was the fix-it.
That made 100% sense to me.
And when he took over,
the only person
when he took over, I mean, it was because of the cyclone. His ratings were through the roof because it was all about cyclone. All Labor needed was a couple more mass events that Chippy needed to help people out with, and they would have been fine. Because from there it started to tumble a bit.
Yeah, and look, in my belief, I think Robertson would be an excellent PM. He has flatly ruled that out after his last attempt. I think the other thing that's worth mentioning, we saw David Little there. He's leaving now. He's resigned as an MP. I want to see people give him more props for his decision to stand aside and put Jacinda forward.
Yeah, Andrew Little, by the way, not David.
Andrew Little, yeah, no, correct. Because I think that showed a tremendous integrity at the time, and it really does seem he has a really strong guiding hand in the party, even with his comments that we played just there.
Yeah,
he's a safe pair of hands, and I think he's a party first sort of man. So, these are the things that the Labor Party is going to have to do. They're going to have to rebuild with what they've got. Yeah.
And they're rebuilding with what they've got, which would have been less because, how much fresh blood is in there seeing they've just lost. I mean, I think we have to remember, you say they've lost 30-ish MPs, but remember, 2020 was an anomaly. So if you have a look back to 2017, they probably had 45 MPs. So they're probably down 10 to 15 since then, which is still a bad down, but it's not as dramatic as the down 30 since COVID. So, because of that, though, there's going to be fewer new faces, fresh blood in there because they don't typically sit inside the top 20 on the list, do they?
Yeah. I would love to be in that caucus room. Good God, can you imagine what the conversations would have been? Yeah, I want to know what lessons Labor are going to take out of this thrashing.
Yep.
And I hope it's not we need to go more in the middle because that is not the lesson.
I think that since we started talking about it, it must be 9 months ago, and I probably mentioned it 5 to 7 times on this show, maybe 7.5, when Luxon made that big hubbub around some research that showed the CEOs didn't like Labor, right? They had that opportunity right there and then to go, good, that's fine. I mean, we'd like the CEOs if we could get them, but we're more worried about the factory floor worker. They just had so many opportunities to reset and go back to their roots and go back to who they were and why they were there. And they were gifted some opportunities and they just didn't do it. So I hope on their reflections and their looking back as to what's happened, they kind of go, where did we come from and where are we going? And actually have a look at the history and have a look at who they were and have a look at who they represented. Because, if the left had have voted, the left probably would have won. But guess what? They didn't vote. Probably 1 million voters didn't vote. And I guarantee if you poll them, a massive proportion of them are going to be left-leaning voters. They're not going to be right-leaning and far-right voters. They're going to be left-leaning
I will start to have a bit more hope if we see some visible signs of them dragging a big book of neoliberal ideas out into the forecourt and burning it.
Yeah.
That'll be my signal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, return to basics, return to the Workers' Party, return to left ideals, kill neoliberalism, dead.
I also do wonder about the very academic thoughts around, and I'm not going to go like Bomber and talk about, these woke lefties, but there is lots of research in America where they go into mining towns and what they have as purple areas. And in those mining towns, purple meaning they could either be red or blue and they do jump around. The thing that always confuses those people is those kinds of social issues that the parties drive as being the most important thing, or even if they're not driving it, there's an appearance of the party driving that as most important or very important, when to the people in the mines and the people who are in those purple areas, they either don't understand them or they don't rate very highly on them. So I think there is a little bit of I don't know whether it's 1% or 10% or anything else of, you need to figure out who you're talking to and how you're talking to them as well. If you want the factory floor worker, especially in the Pacific Island realm, saying lots of voters in South Auckland who may well also be church people and traditionally Labour, it's important to figure out what they need and how to work for them. And I just wonder if the root of the Labour Party has been more worried in the past, in the history, about minimum wage, about workers' rights, about unions, and less worried about academia. And look, you know me, I love academia. I love research. I love all that. But has the voting public, has the traditional left voter got the appearance now that the traditional left, the Labour Party, is more focused and concerned about the research from academia and less about the minimum wage and the factory floor worker? I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud as to what those kinds of conversations are. And look, to be fair, there actually wasn't a lot of conversation around that through this election cycle. And if there was, it was from the other side, talking about how the left will do this. It wasn't from the left saying we will do this, but they've been tarred with that brush a little bit. And how do they put out a accurate picture of who they are, who their voters are, and get them to vote for them? That's what I'd be wondering.
I think I had this thought last night, but I also didn't have a chance to mention it. I think, especially in the post-mortem of the election, right, and we're looking at all nuts and bolts, and everybody's looking at their single key issues, right? And I come back to the EV group that I'm in. There's a lot of discussion about what I was talking about last night with the removal of the clean car discount, right? Yeah. When you've got a single issue or a couple of issues, it's really easy to focus on the fact that, like, people just don't see what the benefit of this was. The opposition to just poo-pooing it. There's a big part of it is that people like us that are focused on these things will look at the policy and tear the policy apart and all of that sort of thing and go, well, this is great policy. This is very bad policy. How could anybody vote for the very bad policy? There is a large portion of the population that is voting on vibe. That they're not tearing these things apart. They're looking at headlines at best. They're making broad, sweeping generalization. They're not challenging their own positions or thoughts. And I don't mean that as a real negative. It's just people. It's just how people are. And a lot of that is who's got the better marketing. We talk about the bumper stickers, right? The bumper stickers, they work. Yeah. For better or worse, they work.
And this other thing, it's not just the headlines as well. It's like and I'll be fair on both sides. It's like the CTU headlines, and it's like the taxpayers unions headlines. So it's not necessarily just the journalist headline, because what we found out, obviously, this time around is the journalists would just reprint the TPU headlines, or they would just reprint the CTU headlines. So you have to also get through that and find out what's a lobby group and what's their angle. And I thought Bomber made a great point last night about, who is going to win out of the EV rebate. I noticed so many specials in my Facebook feed today for EVs today. Yep. Come now, where they're saying that. And that's obviously the fossil fuel industries. So they're going to win out of that, and they're big funders of the right. So...
I mean, again, with if we're talking about marketing, right? We talk about the clean car discount, or do we talk about ute tax?
Yeah.
That was the binary, right? It was the ute tax. It was the ute tax. It was the ute tax. That was the line that the right used. It's the line that the media ran with. And Labour did very little to combat it. I think they even used it a couple of times. No, it's not utes. It's polluting vehicles. That's cool. It's accurate. It's not sexy. It's not two words. Ute tax, ute tax, ute tax, ute tax. I can say ute tax a lot more than you can say polluting vehicle fee bait. Actually, this is working. It's good policy. It was effective policy, but you can't combat it. You can't combat ute tax. That's what it became. And it became you're against farmers and you're against hardworking tradies. And at that point, you'd lost the message.
Yeah.
And then they piled on and said, look how many people are buying Teslas. And at that point, it was out the gate.
Yeah,
and,
like
and
Christopher
National
Luxon,
did
for
that
example.
again and again and again.
And then places like Groundswell, it's very easy to put on the back window of your ute, hands off my ute. And then that's the transformation from, the politician saying it through to the I guess the user, the farmer saying it through to the public. It's easy. You just mentioned vibes. I think it would be a good time to play the second story, actually, because we're talking about the National Party and our next Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, sorry, I threw up the back of my committing to being one of the most transparent PMs there've been, whilst he's locking media out from interviewing MPs. But this is the reason I'm saying this, Chewie, is you should listen, because they start off by asking a question and the reporter says something like, that wasn't a word, it's more like a vibe. Literally, I laughed when I heard it, because the reporter is saying what you've been saying for the whole time, that National wants to work on vibes. It's how this story starts.
Vibe government.
Have a listen.
Hey guys, before I go, can I get one word to describe the election campaign?
That's not a word, folks. That's more of a vibe. And no words of substance from National to enlighten the public about government negotiations either.
Just the blow by blow, doing it through the media. And I appreciate there'll be lots of reckons, there'll be lots of people interviewing typewriters, there'll be lots of people with comment. But actually, the parties have media's role in democracy. Yeah, I do.
Usually, media are allowed to question MPs as they head to caucus meetings, like outgoing MP Ian McKelvey off to say bye-bye.
Are you going to give a wee speech today?
Very short.
What are you going to say?
Very little.
Fuck off.
His colleagues today said even less, though, because the media, the eyes of the public in Parliament, were locked out.
Do you promise to be a transparent and accountable Prime Minister for New Zealand?
I'm going to be very much so, yes.
Right. He's going to be transparent and he's going to be public. Now, of course, you're probably already thinking it, Chewie. I've already tweeted this today, so people out there will have seen me say it. How long till we get the Uffindell Report then, Mr. Transparency? Like, he said it. He's going to be transparent. He's going to be transparent. So how long before the Uffindell Report gets released? That's what I want to know. That's my only question back to someone who says they're going to be transparent. And if they don't release it, then they're not going to be transparent. It's just weasel words. Transparent like you can't see or find him, says sees the memes of Broden.
Well, words are important.
Yeah. Anything you want before we get to the last 60 seconds of this?
I'll save what I've got. Carry
it does
on.
Seem interesting that there was conversations on election night, and I think it was News Hub. Is that where Julian Wilcox is on News Hub? Is that where one of the Māori shows are? Yeah. One of the Māori shows, the Hui or the other one, I'm not sure which one it was, but the host that was hosting one of the nights, saying that that Luxon has that parties have refused to put up on the day after the election, some people to, shall we say, not so friendly media, and that they can't keep running as well. I should find that clip so I can play it for you guys. But yeah, he has been someone who hasn't engaged as much with the media, and I know what those on the other side are going to say. They're going to say, oh, was it Mihinarangi, was it? Maybe it was. Thank you, James. I know what those on the other are going to say. We're going to say, well, Jacinda wouldn't speak to Mike Hosking. Well, is that Mike Hosking was the only one, and they did talk to them lots. Luxon does seem to be ducking and diving in the last few months. Now, will that change? Remember, we said this on the night as well. Will that change because he might have been ducking and diving because he didn't want to put his foot in it? But now that he's Prime Minister, he needs to front. And today, not allowing the media access, it just, without going too far and being too dramatic, it just feels a bit Trumpian. I don't know. That's just the vibe. That's my vibe. It feels a little bit Trumpian. I don't know about you, Chewie, but you're holding your tongue, aren't you? So,
I mean, the proof will be in the pudding. But I mean, again, you look at his experience. He's not a politician.
Yeah.
When you're a CEO and the media comes calling, you've got, you don't have to talk. There isn't the public expectation that someone, a CEO, needs to front the media. The media is invited in. So, yeah, I don't hold out much hope.
So someone's confirming this for it. It was Mihinarangi Forbes saying that Tama wasn't allowed to be, I think it was live interviewed or interviewed. Yeah. So they held people from them. Yeah, I don't know. It feels a bit like, even if it's uncomfortable, you've just won an election. This is time to speak to the people, not hide away in the back rooms. Not Anyway, we'll get to the end of the story.
Accountability promise, but he couldn't promise much else about the shape of the next government, besides 2 top roles.
Only 2 people that we've locked in is Prime Minister Chris Luxon and Finance Minister Nicola Willis.
Luxon appears to be keen not to take on a portfolio himself.
Here it is.
Perhaps just being the Minister of Glue.
In a coalition government, I want to make sure that I'm building those relationships, making sure that we've got strong, stable government. I think a lot of my role will actually be making sure there's good glue.
And he's going to need a lot of glue to hold together a government with ACT, who's pumped up with its new caucus members, and New Zealand First, who've kept a low profile since the election, but New South understands Winston Peters is due to touch down tomorrow.
Well, this is certainly not Peter's first time on Precinct. Because he's technically a newbie, he'll have to come here to the induction hall.
Can you imagine how dismissive Winston Peters is being forced into there? Could you imagine? I mean, if someone asks him a question that he thinks is stupid, he just tells them. Can you imagine Winston Peters being told by these lovely people we're seeing in the background how to book a flight? And he has to sit there and listen to it. Even that, I'd like to be a fly on that wall. That'd be hilarious.
All the freshers are welcomed and taught things like how to make laws, how to book flights, and of course, what happened to John Key's shredded phone.
But even before he's been inducted, Peters has warned...
Now, those comments that Bomber made last night about a second election, just listen to Mr. Peters and what he has to say about this. Now, this might just all be posturing, and he's going to use this as leverage to get a better, get more baubles.
Absolutely.
But just have a listen anyway.
Economics might be stacked against election promises.
Where we have made a very big commitment to deliver tax relief for lower middle income New Zealanders, and that will happen.
Some of the promises you heard in this campaign won't be worth confetti.
Both David Seymour and Winston Peters have put questions across your tax plan. Are you worried?
But he can't walk away from negotiations.
But there you go. Yeah, and there's exactly the thing. When they question him on Winston, his first reaction is to bail.
Worth confetti.
Both David Seymour and Winston Peters have put questions across your tax plan. Are you worried?
But he can't walk away from negotiations. Amelia Wade, News.
Yeah, so there you go. So there was Winston. So yeah, I still going to come back to that thing. I don't know who said it first, Chewy. Probably you, because you're the smarts and I'm the looks of this operation. That when you're the CEO, you don't get questions and you don't get pushback. And he doesn't, in my opinion, he doesn't seem to be able to handle the gentlest of pushbacks. I mean, if it was a personality thing, you'd call it thin-skinned. But I wonder how this is going to work. I really do. I'm intrigued, actually, as horrible as this is going to be for the most vulnerable, and they're the people who this is going to impact, right? And how good this is going to be for the uber rich. Most people in the middle won't see a huge change, I wouldn't think. But, thinking about our more vulnerable people, there could be some significant changes. Headlines today about the disabled community living in fear at the moment about what's been promised before the election. Mm-hmm. I just wonder how Luxon's going to go interacting with the media, who are supposedly the voice piece to us to find out what's happening in those halls.
Yeah. No, it's very clear that when the vibes aren't good, he hits the bricks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, any sort of pushback, any sort of questioning, and he's just tired of it. I don't have an answer for this. I'm out. That is not a transparent leader, and I believe we will see more of it. We will see someone who will not stick around long for media stand-ups more than he said he would. He won't go off. He won't go off script. We won't get the answers. It won't be transparent.
Because the CEO
in this
stands
case,
up the front.
I'm cheering for Winston Peters to just fuck everybody's shit up.
The CEO stands up the front and says, "This is how it is." Nobody goes, "Yeah, that doesn't make sense." That's not something a CEO gets. He may get higher level management going, "Let's mull this over. Let's do some green light thinking or some blue sky thinking," But he doesn't get people going, "Yeah, that's bullshit. We think that's bullshit. Can you explain it again? No, that's still bullshit. Can you explain it again? No, that's still bullshit. Now can you answer the fucking question?" that doesn't happen as a CEO. So he hasn't had that at him other than the last 12 to 18 months. So look, I'm not trying to be like a simp for the left right here, but I'm just saying I'm intrigued as to how it's going to work, if it's going to work, and how that will pan out. And also this whole thing, you've heard him say it now, Chewy, so I'd love your commentary on the idea about not having a portfolio, because that was the article I was talking about. Sounds like he just wants to be the CEO of Parliament and have his managers be the portfolio holders. That's how it kind of vibes.
Yeah, I don't think it sounds good at all. I don't know the history of it, but I think in recent history, prime ministers have had portfolios. They have had important jobs. It's not just a case of going, no, I'm just going to manage my team. That's the whip's job. There's a job for that. You shouldn't need to dedicate all of your time to keeping your team in line. That I don't think it sends the message that he thinks it sends.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting, eh? Right, let's have a look at some of the super chats that have come in, and if there's any other chats as well, you can throw them in there. But Liam says, this was about Damien telling people to fuck off. They were hectoring. Is it heckling? Hectoring Damien? I get it. Says
Hectoring,
Liam.
yeah.
Thanks for the $2 super chat. Caleb, very generous. Appreciate your $20 super chat there. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Labor should have pushed a wealth tax to fund income tax cuts and fought national squeeze middle cuts, popular with the left base plus centre. I agree. And look, I mean, there's even ways you can do the capital gains tax. Like if I was sitting in that room with them, I'd be saying, so let's do a capital gains tax. Let's do this. It's not going to be on houses bought before KiwiSaver started, right? So whatever the date that KiwiSaver started, any house purchase before that is exempt from capital gains tax. Absolutely. Because the generation before us bought houses for their retirement. That's what they did. Because they knew they weren't going to have enough to live off, because there wasn't a saving scheme, because Muldoon got rid of it. But so they bought houses for their retirement. I don't think it's fair to punish them now for them not being provided for a retirement as they were growing, through their work days. So anything that was purchased before, whatever the date is, exempt. And I think you could easily go, family home plus batch, exempt. And that might not get you all the way there, but most people in New Zealand would be like, oh, okay, excludes me. And it would really only impact the top 10%. And I don't think it's
20 houses.
Yeah. 300, and those 300 landlords that, National is going to give more than $1 million back to in tax cuts, might have been putting it the other way. So it's an okay way to do some funding. So, I think there's ways around it. I think there's ways of making it more palatable than just capital gains tax. And that's it. There's other ways. Now, I'm not saying my way is the financially best way, but that's what a negotiation is. Something in the middle that gets us there. Jay says, thank you for the $5 super chat. Appreciate that. For sure, people got tired of hearing all about that heavy academic stuff. Seems like Labor spent more time on research than making big changes. The thing is, the heavy academic stuff is incredibly important, but I think it's probably how it's delivered. That's probably what it's about. And maybe they missed a little bit of a boat with how they were delivering that heavy academic stuff. And they were using heavy academic, maybe language, maybe I'm probably wrong on that, but it just, grassroots. That would be the catchphrase if I was in there doing some PR or marketing with them. And Liam asks, why would Winston want to be speaker? Thank you for the $2 super chat there, Liam. Appreciate it. Yeah, I it's being floated around. The only reason Winston would want to be speaker is if he wants the knighthood, if he really does just want one, because I think the speaker is quite an arduous job, actually, and I don't know if Mr. Peters is the kind of person who would want an arduous job.
I don't think he would have the temperament for it. Personally, he does get a bigger, more comfy chair though. So
he does get to lord it over the people who have been treating him like shit for the last year.
Gets to bang a hammer. There's some pluses there.
Anything else in the chat before we move on to the last story with Moana and David Seymour?
Do I need to go and get David again?
No, leave him alone.
Okay,
he's fine. So Te Ao with Moana is a program from Māori television. And she's obviously been doing the rounds and getting the politicians in, because I see Marama's in there and some other people as well already. And and this is new, they are talking about the election results. And there was a 2 or 3 minute bit with David Seymour where they were talking about the referendum. I want to talk a bit about this tonight because I've had some interactions on Twitter today to do with referendum. I want to clarify something for people. So let's have a look when they have a bit of a chat about the referendum on the treaty.
Speaking of debate, of course, the referendum around Te Tiriti you suggested was a bottom line. What's happening with that?
Well, let's see how those discussions go, but it's certainly critical that New Zealand is able to discuss what the treaty means in 2023. And it's not about whether we value the treaty. Of course we do. The question is, do we agree with the interpretation that's been slapped on it in the last 30 years? I think a lot of people have got confused. They think that if you don't agree with the way that the courts and certain interest groups have interpreted the treaty since 1987, you don't agree with the treaty. Actually, we're pro-treaty. We just don't like the divisive way it's been interpreted lately.
Well, part of your action could be considered to be contributing to that divisiveness, I guess.
Well, I don't really see how promoting universal human rights and inclusion is divisive. The fact that we've been continually accused of divisiveness, but when challenged, none of the accusers can give us any examples of why they think we're being divisive. I think that probably tells you all you need to know.
So on that, right, let's think about that.
Fuck, he's a weasel.
Is there anything that you can think of that he has specifically said that's created that divisiveness? Now, I would say yes, because every time he talks like this, what he's doing is amplifying a sector of society to be racist. Like he's giving them permission to be racist. And it's a bit like we were talking the other day about Fox News. Fox News may not tell their hosts what to say, but they hire hosts that they know are going to say things and see things in a certain way. So there may or may not be anything specific. Like if you looked up racist things Donald Trump has said, you get a big long list. He's easy. If you look up race baiting by David Seymour or racist things by David Seymour, it's harder to nail down a specific thing that comes out of his mouth. Like a specific thing that comes out of his mouth. But I would suggest that what he has done is he's made it more acceptable to hold on to some pretty abhorrent views. Like I had an interaction today. I put up a clip from last night, and I've had a huge number of people agreeing with David Seymour and talking about Bloody Maoris. You know, so they're using David Seymour as a gateway to share their racist thoughts. Is it David Seymour saying those exact words? No. Is it David Seymour making it okay for those views to come out of the shadow? I would say yes. And I wanted to, before you jump in, Chewy, I wanted to read this out. This is from the press. And this is Christopher Hipkins speaking. Christopher Hipkins says this. For example, David Seymour has interpreted tino rangatiratanga only as a right to authority over property, not self-determination, in a way that scholars, the courts, and most importantly, Māori, have defined it for over a century. So when he says it needs to be reinterpreted, the way he's interpreting it seems to be contrary to the way that most, including the courts, including scholars, including Māori, have defined it. His new proposed Treaty Act makes no mention of Māori, or the Crown, or hapu, or iwi. In fact, it only refers to all New Zealanders as if history never happened. In an interview with broadcaster Julian Wilcox, Luxon said ACT's referendum is divisive and National would not support it. However, he would be open to hearing different views about the treaty principles. In a 2022 interview, Luxon said Māori ceded sovereignty when the treaty was signed, a controversial view not supported by the Waitangi Tribunal. Now, you know, I played that clip last night, or I showed that clip about that documentary about Germany in 1940. One of the things, I've got some German friends who went up through their education system, and they all know the history of Germany through the 30s and 40s like it happened yesterday, because they have a system where they teach it again and again and again to make sure it's never forgotten. What we're seeing in America at the moment is we're seeing, conservative Americans and they, critical race theory, which is an academic term for a level of education that's typically university, about looking at the impact of race and how it's impacted the world today, critically based on the history. There are people who are trying to write that out of education textbooks. There are people who are trying to write out slavery from education textbooks. There are people in America who are getting books banned, and some of the books they're getting banned, and look, we won't even go into the gender issues because that may not be the historical aspect, but the books they're getting banned are books that highlight how badly slaves were treated. And when I read that, the quote from Christopher Hipkins, thinking, if this is what David Seymour wants, an all New Zealanders thing, it feels like we talked last night about a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. This is one step to getting rid of textbooks and not wanting to talk about what happened in the early 1800s in New Zealand. And I find that quite scary. So he might be saying, just point out where we've done these things. Well, it feels much bigger than that. Like these things to do with race the foundation is being laid by ACT, and people are choosing to springboard off it. And once we get to step 10 of 1,000 miles and step 100 of 1,000 miles and step 1,000 of 1,000 miles, where will we be with these foundations that ACT is setting, and the questions they're asking now, Chewie?
Yeah, look, I think what David does there, and he does it multiple times. It's like, I've been accused of racism. Show me where I've been racist. It's a classic fucking online debate tactic. I think they call it sea lioning. Yeah. As you ask for unprovable things, because I think David knows exactly what he's doing. He knows the words that he's using. He knows the line that he's walking up to and not crossing, knowing that what he's saying has enough message cut through to the people he's actually talking to, that they will carry it the rest of the way. Yes, David, I don't believe you've said anything explicitly racist. I just think you're tying together a lot of ideas that become racist and speak to racists. I think it's fantastic that you are so even-handed that you can say nice things like everybody's got to be equal. Everybody's got to be treated equally. Well, that's fantastic. So an old lady falls over on the street. I don't have to pick them up because I wouldn't pick up a 20-year-old that fell in the street.
Yeah.
There should be no accommodation for disability or gender or race. Everything's equal, and that's lovely, isn't it? An 8-year-old can do the same 40-hour week that I can do. Equality. It's not equality, David. We didn't have the same starting points. We didn't even have the same track to run. It is not equal. It never has been.
I think what you've just said is that exact point that we've been making here, and we've said this to David Seymour's face. David, the foundation of race baiting and racism is not because you say you want equality for all when it comes to race. It's because you only say you want equality for all when it comes to race. Because as Chewie's just said, you don't want equality when it comes to age. You don't want equality when it comes to gender. You don't want equality when it comes to disability. None of those other areas you want to flatten the field for, because, if you're 65 and you're getting the pension, that's discrimination based on age. It just is, right? But it's discrimination we accept, and you don't want to change that. You only want to change issues to do with race, and that's why it's race baiting. Like, let's go out there and see you talking about we need to cancel and make it all even for the 40-year-olds and the 65-year-olds when it comes to the pension. You know what? The pensioners would be up in arms against you. Because you're making it that you want to make it a level playing field because of race, people of that race are up in arms against you. That's how it works. If you wanted to make it, no more disabled car parks, no more special help in schools for blind students. That community will be up against if you were trying to equal all those discriminations out. But they're not, because the only one you're trying to level out is race, and that's why it's race baiting, and that's why it's racially divisive, and that's what you're sowing.
He's a weasel that uses weasel words, and that's always been my problem with him. I think even when it comes to, like, people are simplifying what he's saying, that we need to do over the Treaty of Waitangi or that sort of thing. But I think he's being even more devious about that. What he's asking for is a re-examining of the principles of the treaty. I'm not going to change the treaty. I'm just going to change some legal stuff around the treaty. Because of course I can't change the treaty, but we can certainly change how we deal with treaty grievances, how we resolve treaty issues, that sort of thing. I can fiddle around the edges of the treaty and change how it's framed and how it's referenced in modern law, so we can put it back to where it was in the 60s, where it was basically useless and ignored. But I'm not saying we should change the treaty. That'd be crazy.
Yeah, we love the treaty. We just hate how you guys interpret it, which is really inconvenient for me. Speaking of,
as my land-owning mates.
Let's get to the end of this.
The indigenous rights, of course.
Sorry, come back up. This is really bizarre. Moana starts talking about the UN and indigenous rights, right? The rights of the indigenous people under the UN. And David Seymour, this is something I'd love to speak to like a sociologist or a psychologist about, because he doesn't seem to be able to engage. He keeps coming back to fixing roads. I know you're probably going to laugh. It sounds a bit weird, but Moana talks about the importance of, she might not say the importance, but she talks about the rights of the indigenous people under the UN, and the response to it from David, it's almost like a glitch. It's like he minimizes it and then talks about roads. He does it twice. It's quite bizarre. And I wonder what it is. I genuinely wonder what it is, Tree. Maybe you've got a thought about it when you see it, because it's quite a big conversation, like rights of indigenous people, even if you disagree with them. But if you disagree with them, then, show us your working. Give us your rationale, what it is, rather than going, yeah, they've never done anything. Now, fixing roads, however, it's quite bizarre.
Declaration of Indigenous Rights is an acknowledgement that hasn't really worked in terms of the human rights issues. So that's an ongoing conversation that a lot of people are proposing needs to be addressed.
Yeah, but what's the UN ever done for you?
Well, it's actually become a voice for Indigenous people in terms of that declaration. But I guess these are sort of the things that will be teased out in the next few years.
It's become a voice, but here's the thing. How do we get the roads fixed so you can get around the country, especially from remote areas? How do you get kids to school?
How do you bounce from
knowledge?
the Universal Declaration of Indigenous Rights to roads?
Because I asked you, what's the...
Isn't it bizarre? It's just like, it's actually bizarre. Like, Moana looks like she's keen to have actually quite a, let's nut this out, because you're not on the side of this. Let's figure it out. Let's give us your rationale. You can see she's engaging, and he's like, yeah, but how do you drive around Northland? It's like, I actually find it quite bizarre. I'm confused as to how this even works in his brain.
UN ever done for you, and you said they're giving you a voice. I say, well, here's some practical things people actually need, and that's the contrast.
Okay, so
who wants the UN to take over the roads?
Out a referendum. That's just the kinds of challenges around compromise.
Then we rule it in, and that's how the negotiation will go.
Did you know that there was a resounding no in Australia around the referendum?
I hadn't seen the final results. I'd heard that was going to be the case from the early results.
It's not looking too positive for the yes.
Well, I think that's very positive for Australia, because they have decided that they want their constitution to be devoid of racial discrimination, and that's how any country's constitution should be.
So he's celebrating the voice falling short. It's a little celebration there. I think that's fantastic.
I think it demonstrates that they don't really acknowledge the special place of their Indigenous people. That's what that says.
And nor should they. They should respect the rights of each individual human being. We've got to stop putting labels on people and saying that some people are born special and others aren't. I mean, I'm sorry.
Say it again, Jude. Make people hear what you just said. Say it again.
I don't think they have ever.
This is part of this argument the whole time. All these groups who people like David Seymour argue that they shouldn't be getting special treatment are all at the bottom of every social statistic. It's like, if they're getting all these special privileges, why are they the bottom of every social statistic? Why are they doing it harder than everybody else?
Do you know what did make Aboriginal people special?
Tell me.
It used to be legal to hunt them.
Oh yeah.
That's pretty special. You could just clear them off your farm. Like, I mentioned yesterday that they were classed as fauna. And I said, oh, that was the 50s or 60s. 1967.
67, yeah.
They stole children and gave them to white families. That was their idea of helping.
Yeah.
And David Seymour thinks it's unimportant, that they shouldn't get any sort of special recognition, any sort of special redress. Fuck David Seymour. How about that?
Yeah, this is the thing that they don't seem to want to ever acknowledge. 1967, so that's not actually that long before I was born. I mean, I wasn't born in 1967, but it's not actually that long before I was born.
We're not talking the crazy olden days here.
And this is the thing I always try and educate people with. Sounds a bit patronising, but I'll say that, educate people with. So if my grandfather was the wealthiest person in New Zealand, do you think that that would give my father a hand up? Of course it would. Do you think that would give me a hand up? Of course it would. My kids? Of course it would. How long, if my grandfather was the wealthiest person in New Zealand, how many generations do you think that would go before you'd see no positive impact? And I think most people would go quite a lot. So let's flip it. My grandfather was the worst treated person in New Zealand. Do you think that would affect my father? Of course it would. Do you think that would? Of course it would. How far would that go before that harm committed on my grandfather was no part of someone's life? Seymour's ilk are the guys who go, yeah, you know, that was in the past, just get on with things. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. And if you're talking 1967 for Aborigines, and if you're talking in the 1950s in New Zealand, Māori children were getting hit at school for speaking Māori, that's not that long ago. It's not that long ago. So people always agree that if it's a positive, it will carry through the generations, but if it's a negative, no. So when they say they're getting rid of cultural reportings out of courts, you fucking assholes. What are you trying to say? That a kid's upbringing is not going to affect them negatively? You would guarantee that if it was a wealthy upbringing, it would affect them positively, and they would see that in the courts because they'd have the money for the fucking lawyers. But if a kid has a negative or a bad upbringing, it's not going to affect them in courts? Go fuck yourself.
I'll tell you what that is about too, Pat. It's the word cultural. Like, it's that obvious. They don't. If they flag it as a cultural report, people's brains go cultural. Māori, Pacific. They don't think it's the same for everyone. It's actually what David really likes, is that it's something that happens for everyone.
Yeah,
I saw a report of a crime today where the guy was in court today or whatever. It was the court report. Drunk white guy driving around with his mates, took 2 pot shots at the Blenheim police station.
Oh.
Now, there was a cultural report for that, because you need to find out what road this guy has taken to thinking that 2 shotgun blasts at a police station was a good idea to do on a Friday night. Everybody has the ability to get a cultural report done. Because of that, the courts, and now me, know that guy started drinking and doing crimes from the age of 12. The judge described it as a pipeline to prison.
Yep.
But that's the sort of stuff that was disregarded, that was unknown when people went to court. You got their list of crimes and that was it. You didn't find out about their family history. But for most people, when they hear cultural report, they will think, Māori. So, of course, we don't want to do that.
All right. Let's just get to the end of this, because we are looking forward to the second time. For some reason, David brings up roading when talking about the yes-no vote in Australia. How he gets there, we don't know, but let's have a look.
That's just so gross. We've got to stop doing it.
What's gross is their kind of how they're misrepresented across all those indicators, similar to other
and that's why we got to deal with get better roads.
Not like individuals.
We got to get better roads because people who live in remote areas find it hard. I grew up in North, and I can tell you all about this.
I don't understand how you jump to roads when we start talking about
Well, it's just the first
indigenous
example.
rights.
Well, roads connect housing. Housing is very important, because ultimately you talk about indigenous rights, but I get to practical outcomes. And how do we make sure that people are transferring more knowledge from one generation to the next? Charter Schools Act has done more for that than any other party.
Fucking charter
shut
schools
those
again.
down. So these are the kinds of initiatives that make a practical difference. We've done far more than the UN ever has, so I can tell you.
I think that we'll be having
Goodness
ongoing conversations. David.
ACT has done far more than the UN ever has. That's what he actually believes. Let's say this. We talked last night about, if there was this referendum, and I think I used the words the courts would overturn it. I probably misspoke a little bit because there is a system in New Zealand where, the laws are made in government and the courts can't necessarily overturn them. I misspoke because in my addled brain, what I was thinking was the courts could make a ruling on whether it was valid or not. And my reference for that, I guess, is this one here. Supreme Court rules in favour of make it 16 to lower voting age when the Supreme Court of New Zealand made the ruling that it was discriminatory against 16-year-olds not to be able to vote. Now, the government has ignored that. So when I was talking about the courts last night and the courts getting involved in the if ACT and New Zealand First and National tried to do this, this is more what I was thinking. I was more thinking about it being taken before the Supreme Court and ruled unconstitutional and ruled racist and have a ruling put by the Supreme Court out there. So just because I used the word overturned, in my head, that's what I was thinking. And I just want to make that clear tonight because some people were, even though I said that a few times today, people were rightfully confused because I used a wrong phrasing. That's what I was thinking. The courts will get involved if they try and do that, and the courts will get involved. The Supreme Court will get involved if they push it through, and they will make a ruling on whether it's legal or not. The government would then have to change it. I get that. So my use of the term overturn it was probably wrong, but that's what I think will happen. Because as we said last night, the treaty is a contract between two parties. You don't have a contract between two parties get decided by popular referendum. Chewy.
Yes, sorry, a little bit distracted there. There is someone calling me out in the chat, and I'm just going to address this. So I'm going to cop to this. Even though I've been called a liar, Liam, don't jump in with just straight up calling someone a liar. It is something that I had seen from an Aboriginal person describing something that had happened to their mother, and it was about a referendum that they had in 1967. That was something that I've seen repeated, and that's what I was going with. But as you have said, that a quick search of that shows multiple articles that wasn't true, and it all links back to that one interview that I had seen. I don't think that takes away from how abominably Aboriginal people have been treated in Australia. But as one of those articles said, I think it's important to focus on the things that did happen rather than the things that haven't. I still think it's absolutely shameful that the Australians have not seen it important enough to include the original inhabitants and landowners of Australia in their current modern government. But in this case, you're right. Maybe don't come in so hot with the accusations of lying.
You can be mistaken. I'm actually just looking at something, seeing you've brought that up. I'm looking at something right here that basically said there had to be a University of Canberra tutor devoted an honours paper to the project in 2015. So they only figured it out in Australia in 2015, and it was an honours paper. And what I would probably say as well to that is, the interview is mentioned in here as well, there's a difference in accuracy between what was said and what is the truth. But I guess the through line for me would be that's maybe how Aborigines felt. They felt like they were treated like flora and fauna. Maybe, could be it. But look, we will always cop to it. We make a mistake. But yeah, I would suggest Liam, you win. you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. And to be a lie, someone needs to know what the truth is and choose not to use it, choose to say the opposite. Mistaken might be the case. And we all fall for well-known myths from time to time. You know, we all see them as that. We try not to, Chewy? How many times have I said to you, can we just double check that? Are you sure about that? Can we double check that? But we actually had someone in the chat say that as well yesterday. So
yeah, absolutely. Look, there's heaps of stuff as well, like when Aboriginal people were given voting rights, or when they were considered British citizens, or that they had to apply for citizenship to the country that they lived in. Like it's like when you're talking about how a system oppresses people, and it's never us. It's never the white people that arrive here in boats because we set up the system. That'd be silly.
And if you want to just check a bit more about it, go fucking watch Rabbit Proof Fence. If you haven't seen that, that'll curl the hairs on the back of your neck. Cool. But that's almost a couple a couple of corrections, Stewie. My one to make sure that my word overturned. I've checked that off tonight and corrected. So I think people will be clearer now as to what we're saying. There will be court action. What happens with that court action, I don't know, but there will be. I'm assured of it. Should that be the case?
And there is a response from Liam here, which I'll put up. Apologise for calling you a liar. Absolutely think that they've been treated terribly. The failure of the voice vote was a terrible shame. It's just a story that I've seen around that really bothers me, which, yeah, absolutely. Get it.
If it's a well-known myth, my suggestion to anybody, Liam included, would be to say, hey, are you aware that's actually a myth, and maybe add a link rather than going liar, and we appreciate that sort of thing. But, you know,
like I get the vibe.
Yeah,
I get the vibe because like there's a lot of like I'm a history nerd, especially around World War II. And there's so many crazy myths that go around World War II that I know that have been debunked, and they just sit around for ages. And then you just put on your hat and you go, well, actually, you know, so yeah, no, all good.
All right, lovely people. Can I just remind you that we do have the merch shop open for this week. We'll be doing an order on Friday and get them in the post next week. If you want to be a part of what we do, if you want to support us, we've got bottom feeder hoodies and t-shirts up for sale. We've also got straight BHN merch. I'm actually wearing one now. I'm wearing the white one. Should I stand up? There we go. There's the white one. BHN. Someone asked, we're both wearing merch. What geeks? We should never match ourselves again like that. Someone asked me in the chat how I get my white so white. I saw that fly, but I don't know who said it. The answer is
it's paint. It's house paint.
I only wear this 5 minutes before a broadcast, and as soon as I get off here, Chewy will tell you, I take it off again. So this only gets worn for a couple of hours a week, so it can stay nice and white. And also, we have got a couple of super chats. We always want to honour those super chats that have come in. So Jay says Seymour is essentially driving the sentiment that reverse racism is real. Yeah, it is really a nonsensical term. Yeah, it is a nonsensical term. I agree with you, Jay, because racism is racism. And the idea of racism is pretty clear cut, actually. People, I think, do use the term racism too much. It's a bit like the term Nazi. It gets used in inappropriate and wrong context. Racism is really my race is superior to your race. Institutional racism is where an institute or a system has been set up to give advantage to one group over another, and the group that it doesn't get an advantage to is typically a minority. So that would be the best way that I think to think about racism. Also from Chris as well. Chris just gave us a super chat.
That's a good comment. $8.99 is a great comment.
So thanks for the $8.99, Chris. We appreciate that. Other than that, Chewy, is there anything else in the chat or anything that you want to mention out there before we head off for the night?
Yep. When you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. I would change equality for equity. But this is something that's come up a few times in the show, so thank you for that. It's really good. I mean, like, this is the thing about Seymour and his idea of equality or equity, is that when we first acknowledge that some people think they've hit a home run, not acknowledging they started the race on third base, you know, because if we're gonna level the playing field, that means we level all the playing field. So people who have an advantage because of money,
people who have an advantage because of their parents, people who have all these advantages, they all need to be leveled, not just race. And we've already said it tonight pretty clearly. That's why it comes off as race baiting. That's exactly it, because he's only talking about race, not any of the others. You can keep all those privileges, wealthy people. You can keep all those privileges, elderly people. You can keep all those privileges, gendered, diverse people, whatever they've got. But you can't when it comes to the colour of your skin. I'm sorry. That's where I draw the line, says Mr. Seymour. All the other people, you can keep your privileges, but if there are any privileges, and I guess I should say if there are, because show them to me where they're benefiting anybody. But by the colour of your skin, we have to get rid of all of those, but any of the other groups that are protected in the law, human rights, we'll keep all of those. Cool. I think I'm done. I can see a little pitch down there from you. Have you got something to share with us?
Yeah, someone sent me to this today, and I proceeded to send it to everybody that I know. I've seen it. That means you guys have to see it now. Are we ready?
Oh, I'm not looking forward to this. Oh, good lord!
A little bit of the old Luxy Suxies. It's unpleasant. It's unpleasant.
Horrific. And horrific. Do you know I learned something the other day? I was always taught you always say "and horrific" because the H it acts almost as a vowel. But I read something the other day when I saw someone writing "a horrific," and I looked it up, and apparently now you can say "a horrific" or "and horrific." Both are acceptable. So there you go. All right, team, you're beautiful. We love you to bits. Now here's a little heads up for you. Now that we've got our Discord going so well, I think, Chewy, that Thursday nights we should do a shorter show and open up Discord. I'd really like to get that going because we seem to be in the groove now for doing that. Right now there's over 200 people with us live. They say in radio that only 5% of people ever interact with a radio station. If it's the same for a online stream, then if there's 200 people, there's 10 people who might want to get on Discord and give us a call and talk about the issues of the week. So we'll remind you about that again tomorrow night, but I'd like to do that on Thursday nights, have a Discord night. Not completely, we'll still have stories, we'll still do what we're doing, but that's disgusting. And Phil there in the chat, where is Discord? Just be with us on Thursday night, because the URL, the domain name for it, the URL changes every week, and I always put it up. Cool. All right, team. Can you get rid of that, Chewy? I'm going to have nightmares. And we will see you tomorrow night.
Sorry,
9
folks.
PM
Not sorry.
for another edition of Big Hairy News. Hooroo.
Cheers, fam.
Oh, I've got to push end stream. This is a classy one. Should we do that again? Nobody's watching now. They've all turned off.
Awkward.
Okay, let's go now. Bye. I haven't gone yet. I thought we'd say bye one more time. Shall I wait till you say goodbye as well? Or just me?
No,
we'll go like this.